And that may be why he went extinct about 240,000 years ago. But Goliath left a legacy. It's a species that appeared around 200,000 years ago. We are that species. Homo sapiens, modern humans. Goliath is our father.
What the fossil evidence shows us now is that our ancestors were giants. They were creatures that were much bigger in their mass and stature than humans are today, all except the very rarest, the very biggest of all humans.
With Homo sapiens, humans have at last become physically modern, but our minds still lag behind. One more giant step remains in the journey from ape to man.
There's DNA and skeletal remains to prove that man evolved from ape millions of years ago. But some religious people refuse to believe this because it proves their man-made religions are false. It proves the world is older than 6,000 years old, and it proves that Adam and Eve never existed. The truth is the world is over 4 billion years old, and people evolved from ape 10 million years ago. All human beings are the descendants of Africa, because the oldest human fossils were found in Africa. This proves that no matter what your race is, no matter what your religion is, every person in this world is a descendant from Africa. Every person in this world evolved from apes 10 million years ago. Now, when the evolution process started, we started off as just apes. But what happened was climate change happened. And it forced the apes to start eating meat. It forced the apes to start hunting for food. And once they started eating these different forms of food, that's what made the apes start evolving into human beings. If you look at an ape usually just eats fruits and vegetables. But when climate change started 10 million years ago, and there were less trees, there were less fruits and vegetables, this is what made these apes start hunting for food. It made them start eating different forms of food. And by doing this, this is what caused the evolution process. This is what caused bipedalism. Bipedalism is what made the apes start walking on two legs. Australopithecus is the first ape to walk on two legs. The skeletal remains of an ape called Lucy was discovered in 1974. And they determined that Lucy walked on two legs. That's how they know that Australopithecus is the first primate to walk on two legs. And then the evolution process went from Australopithecus to Homo erectus. Homo erectus is the first ape to start burying its dead. It's the first primate to start cooking his own food. It's the first primate to start using intelligence and spoken language to communicate with one another. And then the evolution process went from Homo erectus to Neanderthals. Neanderthals are the first primates to not have skin, to not have hair all over their skin. They're the first primates to start having modern day human features like we have today. And then the process started with Homo sapiens. That's the modern day human that we are today. Neanderthals died out 30,000 years ago. And nowadays we are the only human form that exists in today's society. Now the truth hurts. A lot of people can't handle hearing the truth. But the truth is, every human being evolved from African apes 10 million years ago. You can do the research for yourself and find out the truth for yourself. believe in science more than I believe in religion. It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Every person in this world evolved from African apes 10 million years ago. That's the fact. You can try to deny it. You can try to sugarcoat it and try to act like this never happened. But you can't deny evidence. You can't deny facts. You can't deny DNA and skeletal remains. You can't just say this never existed when they have the bones to prove it. I just think more people need to wake up to reality. They need to wake up to the reality that we, in fact, evolved from apes. I know the truth hurts, but some people can't handle hearing the truth. And that's the biggest problem with people in this world. A lot of people want to sugarcoat everything and try to act like we somehow evolved from Adam and Eve when there's no proof that Adam and Eve ever existed. There's no proof of a lot of these man-made religions. That's why I don't believe in religion at all. Because I believe religion divides people. And religions don't revolve around facts. It doesn't revolve around logic. That's why I believe in science more than I believe in religion.
All right, we're talking about scientific frauds. Last time we introduced you to Archaeopteryx and Piltdown men. Let's take a look at Neanderthal. You know, I just saw a Neanderthal picture. It was on Nova just this year, on Nova. Neanderthal was discovered back in 1856, I believe it was, over in Germany. He, at the time, was not looked at as being some half-man, half-ape, because that was 3 years before Charles Darwin wrote his book on Origin of Species. But during the 1870s, some French guy over there said, "Hey, we got a skeleton over here. Let's take a look at this and see if we can't fit this in to Darwin's Origin of the Species." And sure enough, they did. And so, as time went on, you know, there was some controversy about Neanderthal. Now, I can remember Neanderthal when I was in high school. Archaeopteryx and Neanderthal were kissing cousins, and they were part and parcel. I didn't know that Neanderthal was a fraud, though. Now, Neanderthal wasn't a fraud like Java Man. They actually have more than one skeleton of Neanderthal. There's a bunch of them. And they came to find out that this Neanderthal skeleton over here, he's not some kind of a brute. He's a guy that had arthritis. Yeah, he was debilitated. He was handicapped, and probably needed a wheelchair. I don't know whether he had one or not, but he probably needed one. And they took that and they made an artist's conception of what he looked like. Now, an artist can make these bones look like a brute or like a college professor. You know, whatever they want to do, they can just draw it up over the bones. I mean, after all, if you can put hair color and texture and the waves or the straights, you know, into a hair on a Java Man, why can't you make Neanderthal look any way you want him? And that's what they do. They have these artists' conceptions, and people believe it. They look. I believed it. Hell, when I saw this Neanderthal, I said, "Now if that ain't a half ape, half man, I don't know what is." That's what they needed to depict, and that's what they drew up, and that's what I saw, and that's what I believed when I was in the 10th grade. I bought the whole story, hook, line, and sinker. I didn't have any reason not to. After all, my mommy and daddy sent me to public school, and the public school teacher showed me the pictures. Now, why would I doubt mommy and daddy and my teachers, huh? Now, as it turns out, I was lied to, and Nova is still perpetuating that lie, or perpetrating that lie, today, as I speak. But fortunately, the guy that wrote the book here that we're reviewing here, Evolution, Fact, Fraud, or Faith, Don Boys, he went into some other books and other sources and said, hey, let me reveal this to you. You didn't know this, but this Neanderthal, or Neanderthal, well, Neanderthal has become a well-used word in the English language. It's often used to denigrate Christians or conservatives because of our antiquated views. The word carries with it the idea of crudeness, ignorance, and lack of sophistication. Why, you Neanderthal? You ever heard that used? In other words, a Neanderthal was not much of a man, maybe just half a man. and most people make a big deal about Neanderthal man, who was first found in Germany in 1856 with a brain capacity larger than modern man. You believe that? Larger. So we've been degenerating. Yet he was depicted as a barrel-chested, hairy, brutish, stooped person, intermediate between ape and man. Maybe the original big city mugger. Now we know otherwise. He was not ape man, but he was a man with arthritis and rickets, who buried his dead with ceremony, indicating some kind of religious belief, and he was a skilled craftsman. He made tools. Anthropologist A. Montague of Princeton University agreed. He said, quote, "Owing to want of a little knowledge of elementary anatomy, some of these authorities who have engaged in reconstruction of Neanderthal man have represented him with a bull neck, grotesque features, and walking with a stoop. Now it has also often been asserted that Neanderthal man must have been of low intelligence because he had a low forehead. All these slanders are indefensible." Unquote. As early as 1864, the German anatomist Meyer called attention to Neanderthals' physical problems in addition to being dead. And in 1872, Rudolf Virchow, father of modern pathology, boldly said that Neanderthal was not ancient, but a human who suffered from rickets. That was in the late 1800s. But the evolutionists didn't want to give up Neanderthal. So respected scientist Marcelin Boule, B-O-U-L-E, from the National Museum of Natural History in Paris, tried to reconcile the large brain capacity, indicating advanced intelligence, with him being a brutish man. Boule decided to use the pseudoscience of phrenology, using the bumps on the surface of the skull to judge intelligence, and argued that, yes, Neanderthal had a large brain, but it was inferior according to phrenology. If bumps on the skull indicate intelligence, then most evolutionists are old smoothies. So where did the statues and pictures showing a stumbling brute come from? If Neanderthal was a full man who would not be looked at twice on the street tomorrow morning? All recent pictures depict him as a modern man, although stooped from arthritis and rickets. They were pulled from the minds of artists, after all. An artist can make Neanderthal look like a savage or a scholar, depending upon his bias. E.A. Houghton said that the alleged restorations of ancient types of men have very little, if any, scientific value, and that they are likely only to mislead the public. No doubt about that. By 1975, Neanderthal was recognized as fully human, so Neanderthal was not half man, half ape, or half connecting link, but he was a full man with a debilitating disease, so down goes another missing link. Now, in the NOVA presentation, they did not mention a word about Neanderthal having rickets or arthritis. Not a word. This is chapter 18 of the book, Evolution, Fact, Fraud, or Faith. Fact, Fraud, or Faith. And it's written by a guy who is a creationist. And we'll take a look at how many of these creationists are there. Well, some of the biggest names in science were creationists. You know, guys like Sir Isaac Newton and Louis Pasteur. I mean, you know, you take the big names like Kelvin and Watt and so on. These guys are not evolutionists by any stretch of the imagination. And so it's pretty close to half and half. Now, the truth of the matter is, more of these scientists, of the 56% that claim to be evolutionists, see, that's an inflated number. Inflated. And the reason that we know that is because if you're a science professor and you're teaching at Harvard or Yale or something like that, if you were to tell the truth that you really didn't believe in evolution, but you rather believed that creation was probably the better argument, see, you'd lose your tenure there, professor, and you know it as well as I do. You'd be drummed out of there like Immanuel Velikovsky was. So in the past, whenever a history professor or a paleontologist or scientific type, you know, says, here's what I believe, if he doesn't follow the party line, he loses his job. So right away, the people that say they believe in creation either have to be, one, we don't give a rat's you know what, or two, they're pretty safe in their job description, or they'd claim to be evolutionists also. You know, nobody wants to lose his job. It's disruptive. And so they just tell you the party line. So if you're working for the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and you're working on, you know, the Voyager space program or something like that, you know, the official party line is evolution. I mean, that's the story. It's the cover story. And that's what we believe, because that's what I have to believe in order to justify my job. And that's why it's divided up 56-44. Otherwise, it would be probably 60-40 in the other direction, or maybe even better than that, as I'll show you as we progress along, because there's a lot of big name guys right now today that tell you very plainly, hey, I don't believe in evolution. So it leads me to ask the question, well, if big names today tell you that they don't believe in evolution, well, are these guys Neanderthals? Are they fools, blind, stupid, archaic? Well, I don't think so. So what we're dealing with here is philosophy, and philosophy is just that. It's here's what we think. Here's my philosophy on that point. Here's what I think. Here's my opinion, which is worth nothing. My opinion isn't worth anything. Neither is yours. You're entitled to it. It's protected. It's free speech, but it doesn't mean that it's true or false. It doesn't mean jack squat. So, going on here, evolutionists didn't want to give up Neanderthals, so respected scientist, now Marcellin Buhle, B-O-U-L-E, comes along and he says, hey, listen, let's make this into what we want it to be. And they did. And it's being bandied about today, but by 1975, Neanderthal was recognized as being fully human. No missing link. Now, let's think about this for a second. Have you ever thought about these alleged missing links as just being varieties of human beings? You know, on planet Earth today, there's a bunch of people over in the Ituri rainforest of the old Belgian Congo. They're called pygmies. They're little black men, and they're barely 4 foot tall. Just little guys. They look just like other black people in Africa, but then you got some guys called Watutsis over there. They're about 7 feet tall. Great big tall guys. So you got guys 4 to 7 feet tall. They're all black. Over in China, you got people over there that are barely 5 foot tall, and you got some that are 7. We got one here in the United States, plays basketball, Chinaman, 7 foot tall. Do we say today that this 7 foot tall Chinaman evolved out of 5 foot Chinaman, or that the 7 foot Chinaman today is evolving? No, we recognize him as being a Chinese guy that's 7 foot tall. Nothing more, nothing less. Now you've got people that have large heads and their brain capacity is larger than. Do we say that because people have larger brain capacity because their heads are bigger, that they're smarter? Hell, I know a lot of big-headed people that are dumb as a box of rocks, and so do you. So the size of your head doesn't make you smart or dumb.
People come to museums like the Natural History Museum to get answers to their question, have we evolved from apes? Do humans and apes share a common ancestor? And to look at an exhibit like this, you'd think that question had been answered decisively yes. But the answer is far from decisive. In fact, this representation is an interpretation of the fossils, the interpretation of one group of scientists. There are other interpretations, but you won't find them in this museum or any other museum in the world.
In the model of the evolutionary tree, man and apes are said to share a common ancestor. However, evidence of that common ancestor is highly contested. That's why it is still called the missing link. When Darwin's theory of evolution was embraced, it was assumed that in the next century enough fossil evidence would be found to prove that man had evolved from the apes.
Darwinists have promised us a missing link, and so they've got to deliver. They've got to come up with one. Any missing link will do, it seems. Every so often a skeleton is found in Africa. Its discoverers describe it as being the missing link. The headlines come and go, and then later on, that skeleton, those bones are reclassified either as human or as ape. And so far, the missing link is still missing.
One of the most classic examples of this is the story of Java Man, discovered by Eugene Dubois in 1892.
Dubois discovered a very primitive-looking ape-like skull cap, and he discovered this thigh bone about 40 feet away. He said, well, obviously they must belong to the same creature. And that creature walked erect like a human being and had an ape-like skull, so that must be a missing link, the Pithecanthropus ape man. So maybe you had a big ape and a human being living together in Java about 1 million years ago. The important point to make about the Java man discovery is that it's based on a speculative leap in which two pieces of evidence are put together in a way that's not really warranted.
At the end of his life, Dubois realized that the skull cap belonged to a large ape, and the leg bone was from a man. Nevertheless, Java Man was prominently displayed at the Museum of Natural History in New York until 1984. Since then, it has been removed. Today, museums all over the world display models of yet another skeleton they call the missing link, the common ancestor of both man and ape.
Lucy, the famous Australopithecine, discovered by Donald Johanson. He says she was very human-like, but I was at a conference of anthropologists where many of them were making a case that she was hardly distinguishable from an ape or a monkey.
These bones have been restored to resemble a missing link, part human, part ape, and Lucy is now thought of as being our long-lost ancestor. But this is merely an interpretation, the interpretation of one group. Those same bones can be, and they have been taken by scientists, and identified as simply an extinct ape, nothing to do with us at all.
Newspapers are constantly reporting new discoveries that add to our understanding of man's origins, but so far, conclusive evidence of a missing link has not been found. So what happens to the evolutionary model if the missing link does not exist at all? Without it, there's little support for man's connection with the apes, and the model simply collapses.
Some people have said to me, how can you criticize a theory if you don't have something to replace it with? Well, I don't accept that. If the emperor hasn't got any clothes on, then the emperor hasn't got any clothes on. It's not my fault. It seems to me that if Darwinism is wrong, then somebody has got to point the finger.
But we're going to take a trip down what we call evolution's Hall of Shame. And there's been a whole lot of hoaxes and frauds that have been made trying to make man and monkey have an evolutionary link, okay? And we'll just cover a few of those. The first one's going to be the Piltdown Man. That's probably one of the oldest and most famous ones a lot of people are aware of. This is a picture of the New York Times from Sunday, December 22nd, 1912. And if you'll notice on the edge here on the left, you'll see where it says Darwin's theory is proved true. It says here, bones illustrate a stage of evolution which has only been imagined before. Well, I've got some news for you, some updated news from 2012. It's still only been imagined before and will continue to only be imagined in the future. So anyway, this is what they were claiming in 1912. Anyhow, so Piltdown Man was used as evidence for evolution in the Scopes monkey trial. There were hundreds of people because Piltdown Man was taught for 40 years in the schools. So for 40 years, hundreds of people wrote their, doctrinal thesis on the Piltdown Man, and the thing never happened. It was an entire hoax. In 1956, it was revealed as a hoax as somebody who was analyzing this found out that somebody took an orangutan jaw and put it on a human skull on purpose in order to fake and make it look more ape-like. So the whole thing, they taught this, for over 40 years, and the whole thing was not true at all. And it led so many people to believe in evolution, and they continued to believe in evolution after that. I mean, it's amazing. Now, Nebraska Man, now this one a lot of evolutionists will object to me even bringing this up, but Nebraska Man is another one, and I'll show you why I bring this up. I was originally going to take this out of my seminar series, but when I looked up some information on this, there's a reason I kept it in here, and I'll show you. Now, Henry Fairfield Osborn, director of the American Museum of Natural History in the 1920s, was delighted to confirm the discovery of supposedly pre-human fossil tooth by the paleontologist Harold Cook. Now, this is a supposedly pre-human fossil tooth. A single tooth was found. Okay, that's all they found. Now, this is a picture, what you're looking at right here is a picture of the Nebraska Man that was drawn. This was illustrated for the London News in 1922. They made an entire man out of one tooth. And then, over here, they made the guy a wife. You have to be really good to know what his wife looks like based on his tooth, but these are professionals, so don't question them, okay? Until they found out that the tooth was from a pig. That's the real Nebraska Man right there. They got together 9 different artists, okay, from this image right here that I have outlined in red. 9 different artists were given a Neanderthal skull, the same one, and they said, please tell us, from your analysis of what this guy looked like. And they came back with 9 different results, all completely different. Now, Rudolf Virchow, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Virchow. Rudolf Virchow, who is recognized as the father of modern paleontology. Go look him up. You can just Google his name. He's recognized as the father of modern paleontology. He said the bones that were found, the Neanderthal bones, were a modern human that suffered from rickets and arthritis. A book that Dr. Jack Kawazo was given this by a mentor of his. It was an old professor of his, a friend of his, as a mentor. Gave him, he said, this is the book. And I forget when they did this. I can't remember if it was like 1979 or something like that is the year he did this. At the time, this was the top book in the world on Neanderthals. He said, this is what we use in all the professional colleges and everything else. When people are analyzing these skulls, this has all the documentation, drawings, and illustrations of these skulls. But this particular skull, it's supposed to be a child's skull, actually. And this one that they showed, you're going to notice, well, let me just get to the point. This is how they show it in the book. Here is what happened after he got this into a frame in order to take x-rays of it. Because he got the world's first portable x-ray machine to take over there to analyze these skulls. Now, what happens is that the way you're going to see it over here, this one I'm circling, this is the way it was shown in the display case when he took it out. Notice right here the jaw separation. This is the way it's at the display case. But Dr. Kawazo is a dentist primarily, okay? And what he did is set the teeth on a skull set into each other in a particular way. He set the teeth in. He did it 5 times in a row just to make sure he had it right. And when he set the teeth in place, the jaw, you'll notice right here, locked in place where it should be on a normal human skull. You see how what they did in the display case is pop the jaw out to make it look more ape-like. They're lying to people and deceiving people to make them think this is the ancestor of humans. This becomes evidence for evolution. This is a normal human skull, okay, in every sense of the word. This is from WorldNet Daily. This is in 2005. A flamboyant anthropologist professor, and the reason I'm talking about this, I guess I should say first, what I'm going to read to you here is that they have been lying about these Neanderthal skulls for a long time, and it's still happening today. A flamboyant anthropology professor whose work had been cited as evidence Neanderthal man once lived in Northern Europe has resigned after a German university panel ruled he fabricated data. He lied for 30 years about the age of human skulls, dating them tens of thousands of years old, even though they were much younger. So they're still catching people lying about these Neanderthal skulls because they're so desperate for evidence for evolution that this becomes evidence for evolution. And so they go through and they find, I mean, this is another example I give just to show where there are gaps even in this tiny hole. In 1973, South African geologist, a guy named Partridge, dropped a bomb. His investigations revealed that a cave from which the tongue, this is Africanus, this is the one I have circled up here, the Africanus skull, had come could not have formed prior to 0.87 million years ago. Well, that means there's the 0.87 million. Here's where Africanus is supposed to be, and that gives you a large gap of about 3 million years that they don't have accounted for. I mean, and so the thing is, this guy, I mean, from what I read from him, this guy was fired immediately and kicked out. I mean, because you cannot discover anything that goes against their preconceived evolutionary geologic column. But this is what's Lucy's supposed to be back here that started, between 3 and 6 million years ago. And this is the Lucy skeletal display. These are the bones that were claimed to have been found. So Donald Johanson discovered Lucy. This one. Now these are the bones, but here is the typical skull that is shown in the textbooks. This is a picture of the typical Lucy skull. Can you explain to me how you get from this to this? Now, the knee I'm showing you here is claimed as Lucy's knee, but this is not Lucy's knee, okay? National Geographic called it Lucy's knee 5 times, and Donald Johanson allowed them to do that. He only didn't, when somebody pointed out, wait a second, that's not Lucy's knee, then he suddenly retracted it. I don't know why he allowed them to call it that 5 times in their November 1985 issue, but he certainly did. It seemed like he didn't want to say anything about it. That the knee that was shown here was found a year earlier and 70 meters lower and over a mile away from the site where he found the rest of the bones. So now Jeff Lewis on his website said, oh, this was our ancestor long ago, but the Houston International Festival that was holding Lucy there said, this is not the same as humans. It's not a direct ancestor. But here is what's so ludicrous about this. Listen to this. Later on in this same article that they wrote, they said for 20 years Lucy was thought to be the oldest human-like fossil ever found, and as we just saw, they said it's not anymore. It's not part of the human ancestry according to evolution. But watch this. Lucy remains the benchmark by which all other discoveries are judged to discover more about the progress of mankind. St. Louis display, they put, and you'll notice if you look at the Lucy bones. Let me back up here and show you. I want you to notice something. Here we go. I went too far. This is the skeleton. Okay. Notice there are no feet or hand bones that were found. All right. Now I want to go forward. Let me go back to where I was just a second ago. I want you. Do you notice the problem here? Notice how they put feet and toes, and they put 5 toes like a human, and then in this display there's human footprints, and they put a slight toe separation in order to make it seem like it's transitioning from an ape to a human. This is flat out deception. This is a flat out lie. They are lying to kids coming through their zoo. Okay? This purpose of this display is not to educate, it is to indoctrinate, okay? Now, David Menton, who I mentioned earlier, he says this statue is a complete misrepresentation. He says, I believe they know it is a misrepresentation.
As I said, over the past 150 years, these archaeologists and anthropologists have covered up as much evidence as they've dug up, literally.
Basically what you find is something we call a knowledge filter. This is a fundamental feature of science. It's also a fundamental feature of human nature. People tend to filter out things that don't fit, that don't make sense in terms of their paradigm or their way of thinking. So in science, you find that evidence that doesn't fit the accepted paradigm tends to be eliminated. It's not taught, it's not discussed, and people who are educated in scientific teachings generally don't even learn about it.
According to geologist Virginia Steen McIntyre, she was silenced at the height of her career because of her determination to report the facts. In the summer of 1966, a collection of stone tools, including this leaf-shaped spear point, was uncovered at Hoyatlico, Mexico. To find out exactly how old the spear points were, a team of experts from the United States Geological Survey was called in to date them.
And I was rather naive. I thought, okay, we've got something big here, but I'm just going to stick with the date. We've got the information, we got the facts, let's get the facts out and go on from there. And I didn't realize it was going to ruin my whole career.
According to Dr. McIntyre, because she stuck to the facts, all of her professional opportunities were closed off. She's not worked in her chosen field since. The site was closed and permission for further investigation was denied forever.
It's not necessarily a deliberate conspiracy in the sense of some people getting together in a smoke-filled room and saying, we're going to deceive people. It's something that happens automatically within the scientific community. So when a given piece of evidence disagrees with the predominant theory, then automatically people won't talk about it, they won't report it, and that means that science fails to progress in the way that one would hope.
Life. As scientists, it's not our job to force the evidence into a theory that just doesn't fit it. And so I have absolutely no desire or reason to uphold Darwin's theory at this point.
I think what we're seeing today is a series of scientific discoveries that are opening the eyes of more and more scientists to say, wait a minute, I can no longer believe that pure naturalistic processes can account for the origin and diversity of life. There must be something else here.
The challenges to Darwinian theory have led more than 600 scientists with PhDs from major universities throughout the world to sign a document titled A Scientific Descent from Darwinism. It reads in part, "We are skeptical of the claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life."
These are scientists with PhDs from Stanford and Berkeley and University of Chicago and Cambridge, major universities, who've looked hard and fast at the evidence and have walked away saying, I am not convinced. Maybe there's another explanation. Personally, the negative evidence forced me to conclude that Darwinism would require a blind leap of faith that I just had no good reason to make.